Hey everybody, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a different video here. I'm in my little studio upstairs, not at my typical Kronos workstation, so what I'm going to show you is how to do sampling. So the sampling's a little bit different in the Kronos, not everybody knows how to do it, and it's been something that quite a number of people have requested lately, so I'm going to show you how to do that. I don't have one of the USB CD drives, so I can't rip an audio CD, so if you want to know how to do that, it's in the manual, or you can look it up online, but I'm going to show you how to do the basics of samples. So once you get WAV files into the Kronos, how do you assign it to keys, how do you do key mapping, and maybe explain a little bit on how the key mapping works and how you save it so that you're not losing files, and how you can get those files to boot up when you boot up your Kronos, like those kinds of things, really useful pieces of info. So I'm going to go over all of that. I'm recording this with my cell phone. I don't have a tripod, I don't have mounted cameras, and I'm not really that great at editing videos, so it's kind of what you see is what you get. So it's not going to be the best audio quality and that kind of thing, but hopefully you find this useful if nothing else. So let's go ahead and get started. First things first, in my keyboard setup, I've got my Kurzweil. It's a PC3K8. I've got a sample here, and I want to get it from here to here. So that's kind of our goal. And the way I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to be using Audacity. I'm going to be just kind of doing an analog thing. I could probably just rip the audio file right out of the Kurzweil and then save it to a disk, but I'm going to show you how to do this with just general audio. So here's the audio sample. It's assigned to this key. So it's the sound of an electric motor, and it's going to do a little kind of airy follow-up here. There it goes. Okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to rip the audio straight off of the Kronos. Now this audio source, if you're using something like Audacity, if you have a computer and you're going to be doing it that way, you can use basically any audio source and then just kind of massage it and cut it up however you want. And I figure for most people this is how they might be doing it, unless you already have the WAV files, in which case you're a step ahead. So I'm kind of coming from the back with this one. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm gonna start the recording here, and I'm gonna play the sample. And we'll wait for that follow-up because I want that too. There we go. All right. I'm not going to spend too much time doing this editing here. I'm just going to get rid of kind of the intro. And let me hear if there's... Where does the audio stop? Right there. Okay, so that's actually a good length. I'm happy with that. I'm not necessarily happy with the volume, so let me just amplify it just a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean, 10 dB should be more than enough, because I want to have a nice, clear signal when I'm doing my recording here. Okay, it could stand to go a little bit more. When I amplify, I'm just worried about it, bringing silence hiss into it as well. I mean, it should be fairly good, though. I have a good sound card and good clean recording interface thing. Yeah, I was gonna say I apologize for the mess, but I haven't been in the studio in a while, so I'm not gonna apologize. Let's just deal with it. Alright, that sounds pretty good, and if we skip ahead here... Okay. And there's no audible click at the end or anything. I'm happy with this sample. So let me export it. So as I export it, I'm going to export it as a 16-bit WAV file. You could do 24, I guess, but we'll call this reverse motor. Okay, reverse motor. Okay, good. I don't need any extra data. Alright, so far so good. So I've got my audio files. There's my reverse motor here. So let me grab my USB stick. USB. Let's put this in this one. First time. That never happens. Alright. So I've got my to Kronos. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my reverse motor sound and just pull this in here. Good. And it should be on the USB stick. Now if you're super careful and you eject your stuff all the time, then feel free to do that. Oh, ejected. Alright, very good. Safe to remove. Awesome. Alright, let's go to the Kronos and plugify this here somewhere. That's my official word, by the way, is plugify. I don't know if anybody else has ever used that, but the definition of plugify is if something has a place that it plugs into, do that. So that's what we're doing. Trying to do this through the viewfinder as well as keep you guys entertained somewhat. There we go. That's better. So now we got ourselves a little Kronos action. So when we click on the sampling button, sampling. When we click on the sampling button, first thing it does is it brings us right to the sampling page. Now something that you'll need to know is that this sampling page, you don't actually save samples here. I mean, you save them in disk mode, you don't save them from this page. So if you'll notice when we click up here, we can change the name, we can copy it, we can move things around, but we don't actually do anything with that. So let me get my little pointer stick thing. Yeah. For those of you that are wondering, I use a Wii U pen because I don't use it with the Wii U because I don't really play games much anymore, as much as I used to anyway. So first things first, we need to create a multisample. Now, as it sits, when you first kind of open this up, you've got a bunch of multisamples slots that are available. So I'm going to choose a new slot, and it's going to ask you, well, okay, do you want it to be a stereo track? So I'm going to say yes, I want it to be in stereo, and let's go ahead. So we've got a new multisample. Now you could actually start right from the beginning if you wanted to use those ones. Just for consistency, I'd leave those two blank because I just do. No particular habit or reason. Okay, so now that we've created a multisample, the way multisamples work is that you've got 8 zones. Now, that's for like stretching multisamples and that kind of thing. So if you wanted it to take up a few keys, you can set up zones, and that's what this is right here. So the original key is, what key is it in? What key do you play it on? I tapped something by accident. I don't know what I did. Okay. Oh, it's at the bottom of the screen. Okay, I was resting my hand. Anyway, so the original key is the key that it's played in. The top key is where that zone ends, and then this shows you the current range. So right now we're going from C1 to C2. If I were to change this top key, this range would change. When we hit create, we create a new zone. So by default, we've got one zone that spans a certain distance, let's say. And then we assign a sample to that distance. So let me do exactly that. So when I go to my sample, you'll notice I haven't loaded anything yet. I don't actually have a sample. So I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse, or however that saying goes. So I need to go into disk mode, and I actually need to load up that sample. So I'm going to go into, it was to Kronos. I had a folder to Kronos. And it was, where was it? Reverse motor. And I'm going to hit play. Oh, this might be really loud. Hang on, let me just turn that down. Okay, so that's the sample. So I'm going to hit load. We've got a name for it. We'll hit OK. Oops, my finger was covering the screen there. And let's get out of here, and we're going to go to sampling mode. So now that we're in sampling mode again, let's go ahead and assign that sample. So you'll notice I've got reverse motor. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to think of this page that we're looking at right here as a program. And what I mean by that is that a multisample is a lot like a combi, where when you look at a combi is a whole bunch of programs made up to create a performance thing, right? Well, when you look at sampling, if you think of sampling the same way, you've got a bunch of individual samples, and those samples have their own properties and that sort of thing. And when you combine a bunch of samples into a multisample, it's like a combi. So if you think of it in terms of, you know, programs and combis, that might be a little bit easier to understand. So next thing I want to do, and I apologize for the shakiness here, I don't have a stand that I could use to really make this any easier. So I'm going to assign it to a key. So the original key is actually D. I can't do this, but if I were to hold down Enter and just press D, it would automatically change, but I'm going to change it manually there. There we go. And the top key is also D. There. Now if I wanted to create a new range, right, I could hit create. Notice we've got new ranges available. So right, I was trying to tap them, but right here you can see we've got new ranges. So it's showing from D sharp to D sharp. Create a new range. Notice I'm creating a whole bunch of different ranges there. And again, you're not necessarily limited to 8. This is just kind of giving you an indication of the first ones. But here, when we're, see index. I'm going to go back to index. See how it highlights? Index 1 is from C1 to D2. And this is where that sample is going to lie. So what we've done is for C1 to D2, we've assigned this motor sound. If we go to the next index, which is our next mapping, we can assign a different sample that we've loaded there. So we could assign something else if we've got a bunch of different samples assigned. So you can start to see how it is kind of like a combi, where we've got things that are assigned to different individual keys, and we could have a whole bunch of them, like a whole bunch of ranges. Okay, so let's go back here. I'm actually going to leave that. I don't need all of these zones, but I'm just going to leave them for now. So I'm going to go back to my index of 1. I've got my sample that's been assigned. Now something that you may want to consider doing is you may wish to edit the sample. So here, under sample edit, you can see the waveform, and this is where you get to choose where your start and your end point is, and also if you have a loop point. I'm not going to get into the details of that too much, but basically, start means where does it start, where does the loop start, so once it plays through the sample once, where does it go back to, and then the end is where does the file end and where does the loop end, and you can choose things like reverse it or set the loop, otherwise it's just going to play it through the once. This plus 12 dB thing is talking about how loud it is. If you're going to use the sample in a single key, we're talking about things like drums, then you can leave that plus 12. But it's even recommending in the manual that if you're going to do anything that's polyphonic, you probably want to turn that off, because as soon as you start layering things, it's going to get real loud, right? And I won't get into the details of everything else. So let's go back to the editing. Okay, so next thing, auto loop on. Yeah, we don't, did I forget to take that off? No, okay, that's fine. I don't really need it to loop. Okay, create zone preferences. So when you create a new zone, where does it go? How big is it? And what's the original key? And the original key, position is simply referencing when you create the key, which one is it? So is it at the bottom key of the range? Is it the center? Is it the top? And in a lot of cases, if you're going to stretch files, instead of assigning one thing per key, one sample per key, you might have one sample for 3 keys. So you might want it to be the center. Anyway, I digress. We've got a little recording level meter here on the right. We could choose audio input, so I'm sure this is probably where you would go to start recording. And this is where we have this like sampling, record, start, stop. I'm sure that has something to do with it too. I really honestly couldn't tell you. So let's go back. So now that we've got our sample, we've got it assigned, the next thing we do is we need to have it in a program. So again, we don't save this yet. I am going to rename it though. So let's rename it. Let's clear what's there. And I want to see if this works. Apparently in the manual, if you hook up a keyboard to your keyboard, you can write stuff out. So I'm going to say motor. And that did all kinds of nothing, didn't it? Oh, it was worth a shot. Maybe that keyboard's broken. I don't know. Or maybe it's one of those ones that requires drivers, which is also possible. Motor, reverse. I know I'm not terribly consistent with my naming strategy here, but you get the point. Okay, so far so good. Now, we've got our sample. I want to go into a program, and I'm just going to go to a blank spot here. Let me see. Do I have one? I have a lot of stuff going on here. There we go. Let's grab this one. Okay. Next thing. In the HD1 synth, notice it's not AL1. There's no sampling in AL1. Here, under multi-ROM, I'm going to choose sampling session. Oh, I chose mono, didn't I? Here, stereo. Then I'm going to choose my sample. Motor reverse. Okay. Now, in theory, I don't know what I did wrong. See, it's from top to bottom. Oh, that's what, I was just pressing the wrong damn key. Okay, and in theory, if I were to press lower, yeah, the pitch changes. Cool. Now here's something else. See this button that says hold? If you tap on that, it disregards your ADSR, ASDR, attack, sustain, decay. Anyway, it ignores your amp and basically it presses it and then just, it's the same as you holding it down on the sustain pedal. So if I do this, now it's going to automatically play the whole sample. So that's good to know, especially useful for things like drums. Now, something that's interesting to note is when I chose my sample, I chose the left one, but funny enough, I don't know if this records in stereo, it actually plays back in stereo. So despite it, because it's a stereo sample, I'm pretty sure if I were to choose session mono, then I'd have to add the right channel, but because it's stereo, we'll do that, and it's automatically playing in stereo as well. So we've assigned the sample, we've assigned the sample to the program, and we've assigned it to a key range. Now keep in mind, if I were to go back to sampling, and I had a bunch of different samples assigned to like different key maps, right? And you can have clearly quite a bunch of them. If I were to have different samples assigned to different key maps, when I go back to my program, those would be assigned to the rest of the keys. So it would be like a combi in the idea that each key is its own program, its own sample is its own program, and then you're using multiple layers, like a combi, to assign them to the rest of the keyboard. Okay, now I just did that with one, and at this point you can do whatever you want to it. So if you wanted to add effects to it, you wanted to do whatever else, change the volume, that kind of thing. Something that is fairly common is people will go to the amp EQ, and under their amp mod, they'll assign velocity intensity. That way, right now, if I press soft or if I press hard, it's going to be the same velocity regardless. So you might want to change this. So the harder you press, the louder it gets. I'm perfectly fine with the sample being basically triggered at this point. Okay, so far so good. Are you following? Any questions? Probably. Okay, that's fine. Now what we need to do is we need to save it. So we're going to go back to disk mode. Actually, let me save this program first. And I'm just going to call this motor. And my finger was totally in the way. Sorry about that. Got the lazy finger happening. There we go. All right. So now we're going to go to disk mode. I'm going to save this. And nope, here, save. There we go. All right. So when I go save sampling data, this sampling data screen pops up. There we go. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it motor. Now, keep in mind what we're doing is we're not just saving the program or the sample. We're not just saving the combi, so to speak. We're saving the whole multi-sample. So let me be okay with the name here. Now, if you say all, it's going to back up everything. If you say all multi-samples, it's going to choose all of the multi-samples in your entire keyboard. that you have created. We can say all samples. This will create the samples. It's like saving the programs, combi, everything. Hopefully that makes sense. So we can save the samples. We can save the multi-samples, meaning the combi and the samples themselves. We could choose one multi-sample. Now I've only made the one, so I might choose that one. Or we might choose an individual sample all on its own. In this case, I'm going to choose all multi-samples. I've got a name for it. Motor O2, sure. That looks good. Force new user sample ID. Warning, programs will be disconnected from the sample data. Yeah, as soon as you change the name of the sample, the program is going to point to a bad sample. It just doesn't exist anymore. So I'm going to hit OK. And eventually we should see motor002.ksc. Now here's how we know if it's a good or not. Think of this as the program data. This is our sample data. Or maybe I've got it backwards, one or the other. But when I open this, it shows the sampling mode data, shows the multi-samples, right? And then it shows I say the program, it's the sample that's associated with it. Now if I click on here, and I go open, it's red. It's calling it Motor 02. This is more or less just the folder that contains the sample itself, which is actually going to be stored right there. So if we were to open that up, you'll see we've got the key maps and then the folders that contain the sample itself. Okay, so then the question is, so now that you've created your multi-sample, you've saved it, how do you get it to load when you start up your Kronos? Well, here's how. Now that we've got our multi-sample and everything done, when you go to global, we have a button down here that says KSC auto load. And this is where you get to choose what's added, what's installed or what starts when we start the Kronos. So if I say add KSC, and then I choose motor, where is it? It's around here somewhere. Maybe I'm just not seeing it. Oh, I guess it really depends on where I saved the file too, doesn't it? Yeah, I forget where I saved it. Alright. Let me go back to my disk mode. Where did I save it? Oh, I saved it to not my hard drive. That's why. Alright, let's try that. Let's save our sample data. Do this the right way. All multi-samples, Motor 02, good. Alright, let's try this again. Now if I go, let's add a KSC. So we're going to choose one that we want to load up. There it is, Motor KSC. Good. And yeah, that's fine. So we'll say, oh, did it add it? I'm not seeing it. Alright, I must not have hit OK. Alright, well whatever. We'll click add. Alright, let's see here. There's my motor. Shows you how many megs it'll take up. If I click do auto load now, what's going to happen is it's going to erase all the stuff that's in your RAM, and it's going to load as though you've just booted up. So let's hang on for a minute while it does that. This officially is the most exciting part of loading the Kronos, right here. It's loading all your samples. Look at those delicious samples loading. Oh yeah, preload. Go through the preload. Delicious preload. I'm just saying things, I don't know what they mean. I'm sure a psychologist would love to give me some introspection on what all of this could mean and how it relates to my mother, but in the meantime, we'll just wait. Wait for this to load. There. Alright, now the big test. When I go back to sampling, now keep in mind, this would have been deleted, but when I tap here, I can see that it's actually still there. And let me go back to my program, motor, and let's see if it works. Sweet. So far, so good. Now I'm going to do something crazy. Yeah, I'm just going to turn it off and turn it back on. Let's yank this out of here. I'm sure somebody somewhere is having a kitten because I just did that while it was booting up, but it'll be fine, I promise. And we wait once more. Maybe I'll edit this out. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just talk while the keyboard boots up. Actually, yeah, so I can. Somebody asked me fairly recently, actually, some performance tips when it comes to, you know, playing live and how do you get the sound equal between all of your patches or all of your setups and combis and that kind of thing. And there's kind of a neat trick that I wanted to show that I find super useful, actually, which involves using your effects. So when you're using your effects, you can use the master effect, like the master out, to see what the VU meter is reading for your overall volume. The problem with that is that while the VU meter gives you a digital indication of how loud things are, bass in a live theater, depending on how your mixer, like who's running your soundboard at the front of the house and that kind of thing, or maybe you're the sound guy, right? It depends on how they EQ everything and how the room itself sounds as well. So there's no real good indication. I would say the best thing to do is just make sure that depending on your amp system that you're using for your keyboards, that you keep things, I don't want to say as flat as possible, but if you have a PA at home that you can use, even for testing, like I've got these Blue Sky Studio monitors, and they're pretty darn flat. And I've also got these headphones. These ones are not flat. These ones are bass heavy. What are these? AT something 40s, I think. Yeah. I have some other ones downstairs that are a little bit better, but proper studio cans. But yeah, these do the trick. They keep things pretty flat. And when I go from EQing my sounds here and I bring it to the live situation, it seems to translate really, really well. All right, so everything's loaded. Let's go back and figure out where the heck I put the sound again. I think it was down here. I have one that says motor. All right, so we've got this motor. There it is. Now, if there was a red box up here that said something like samples not loaded, typically you can hit this menu button and say load required samples, and what it will do is it'll go to the hard drive and load the samples for you. In this case, because I had this part of the KSC to load, now when I click down here, now keep in mind, this just booted. Now it's loading whenever I start up my keyboard, which is awesome. And that's basically the video. Let me show you real quick that EQ trick thing that I was talking about. Okay, so this little dude down here under your master volume, this is going to show you if it's clipping or not when it's, you know, starting to get louder. So if I were to go to a combi, and I'll give you a kind of a hint of something that I'm working on here. Okay, so right here, perfect example. Samples not loaded. So I'm going to say load required samples. Okay, it's going to load the samples that I need for this particular sound. The red goes away, all is well. Okay, let me turn that up a little bit. Here we go. This is part of a song that I'm working on. Okay, cool. So, if you go to Master Effects, look at this in the bottom here. Okay, and if I hit the bass, okay, so it doesn't ever really get up more than half, and I mean it might if I were to play with both hands, but I can't hold this with my teeth and still aim at stuff, so you can use that as a general indication. Now what's cool is when I go to the next sound, and I go back to my Master Effects, this sound, I haven't EQ'd it yet. Okay, right? So you can see that it's actually louder. Okay, so you know what that means. This volume is way too loud. Now, if you've spent the time to go through all of this stuff and mix it properly compared to one another, when you go to the Master Effects, here's your tip. Just drop this volume down, and you'll notice suddenly it's internally consistent with itself, meaning it's consistent with its volumes here. But you can go here and make it consistent along all of your other applications, all of your other combis and programs and so on. So that was that quick tip I wanted to show you. This video is already half an hour long, which is a lot of talking, not a lot of playing. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. But if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Let me know. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to it. And also check out the Korg forums. I'm there a lot as well, and there's a lot of really knowledgeable people that can give you a heads up and tips and that kind of thing. So hopefully you found this helpful. Thanks, bye.